All right, welcome back. We're talking chapter three, digital gaming and the media playground. I am surrounded by notes here, so we have a lot to talk about. And so, what I want to do is break this up into two parts. So, part one, we're going to talk more numbers here and just basically who plays video games or on their phone or on their consoles or whatever. And then, of course, part two will be more of a history of digital gaming, why video gaming has a reputation for being addicting, and then finally land the plane with a little bit of basically the business of digital gaming, which should be very interesting. Once again, I want to remind you that I will have a code word in part one and a code word in part two, so that basically you can have some extra credit on an upcoming quiz or exam. All right. Well, hopefully you see the PowerPoint in front of you here. And we're going to get started on chapter three here, digital gaming and the media playground rather. All right. So I wanted to first talk about the financial health of the video gaming industry. This is an overview of the strength, weaknesses, and future outlook. And I think, before I get into that, obviously, this is a really kind of fun chapter to talk about because I think basically, video games are played by just about everybody. You might make an argument that anyone over the age of like 70, for example, is probably not a video game player, but anyone under the age of maybe 65, 70 is definitely got some kind of video game or some kind of gaming component within them. And I say that because, as you know, I've said before, I'm, around 60 years old here. And I literally was introduced to video games at the age of 10. So I've been playing them my whole life. Obviously, my kids play them. I know that they're your peers, obviously. So the deeper we get into this, I think the more people will be playing video games until basically the day they die, just because they've grown up with them. Like and my generation, as boomerish as it is like people like to say, definitely has video games, I should say, on the table, since we were pretty young. So that being said, industry strengths right now. Well, the gaming industry is growing quickly worldwide. It is obviously on par and does kind of exceed, I think, other areas of mass media, including like the film universe. So it, still because we have a ever-growing population on planet Earth and one that continues to embrace video gaming. There's no doubt the gaming industry is growing quickly worldwide. I'll give you some numbers here shortly to prove that. Most growth has come from the mobile and online games that are easy to access, the things that are on your phone right here. Certainly when we get into history, we'll talk about, it was not always that easy to get video games and certainly play a different variety of them. But of course now, with the iPhone coming along earlier this century, that has certainly changed the game. As far as big companies go, the three biggies are Sony, Microsoft, and Tencent. If you're not familiar with the gaming industry, Tencent, of course, is a major Chinese company. But all three of those, game manufacturers, Sony, Microsoft, and Tencent, are all leading the market. Industry weaknesses. Well, certainly making modern games is very expensive and takes longer than before. In the near the tail end of I should say part two, I'll tell you exactly how much money it does cost. But making a modern game is a very expensive proposition. And yes, it does take longer, and there's lots of reasons for that, which we'll get into. Profits are shrinking because costs rise faster than sales. I would say that's generally something that's happening across the board in mass media. It's expensive to produce content. And in this case, it's video game content, right? And in other cases, it's film content or streaming content. No doubt, money is the driver here. And of course, if you're a company, a mass media company, you're trying to maximize whatever that profit margin is, correct? With so many new games released, smaller titles are struggling to get noticed. We just have an overabundance of access to different types of games, different kinds of manufacturers, etc. And so, how do these folks, I guess pierce the ether, if you will. That's something that the video game industry is certainly dealing with at the moment. How about key risks? Well, many studios are facing layoffs or even shut down completely. It's interesting. I just read a story recently. That there was a major. This is just film, guys. And again, I think there's a relationship here to be had with the video game industry as well. But many studios are facing layoffs or even shutting down. And I don't know if you guys heard, but recently there was the studio that's over there in Studio City, and I'm blanking on the name. Radford, there we go. The Radford Studios on the Radford lot. I just read recently is in bankruptcy, and it's in bankruptcy because apparently only like 50%, 50 of those sound stages are being used on a daily basis, and so certainly I think as technology and other factors come along, expense. Certainly the film industry is vulnerable, and I would say so is the video game industry for different reasons. Small and independent studios often struggle the most to survive. And, you can, if you want to take a deep dive, look into the rules, laws, and politics in countries like China and the EU that are affecting sales for different reasons. China, of course, being a very closed off, sort of oppressive sort of government when it comes to how games are used. In fact, I'll give you an example. If you look at China, has spent a lot of time within the last 5 to 10 years trying to limit video game play. It's interesting, limit video game play in China, yet wanting to sell video games because it's there's so much profit to it. So, for example, if you live in China and you're under the age of 18, for example, and you were trying to play, for example, I don't know, I don't have a game off the top of my head, but you were trying to play a favorite game of yours, chances are that there would be probably a hour restriction or a even day of the week restriction, or even just a restriction on if you could buy it based on the whim of that government. So it's a very interesting. I would recommend that you spend a little bit of time on the web and look at what China is doing, or what China's past history has been with limiting access to video gaming, which is something that we don't do here in the U.S. All right. Future outlook, the gaming industry overall is still strong and growing despite all of this. I mean, again, it's one of those industries that I think, unlike some other forms of mass media, like maybe newspapers or magazines or radio, for example, I think video gaming is here to stay and is not going anywhere. And it's again, as people age up, population grows, games will still be very much a part of our existence as humans, right? Large companies are more stable and safer than small studios, and there are new ways to play, like subscriptions and cloud gaming are becoming popular. And of course, constantly being able to just download a game on an app for free really is, and starting at that basic model, and then obviously adding on if you like the game. I think that's become a very popular way to play, right? And one thing that I've talked a lot about in person is AI, and how AI has affected different industries. And certainly AI can be a helpful tool in terms of, I think, creation and cutting costs in the video gaming industry. Certainly streamlining processes to get a game made faster and tested quicker. But it also, on the flip side, has taken a lot of the human element out of it, and that's not necessarily good. And we'll talk in other ways of how AI has affected film and television down the road. But AI certainly is, I think we can all agree that AI has some very big advantages, particularly when it comes to time and being able to gather information or create something in a very short amount of time. But think about, how does that affect the creative process where you had real human beings that were doing some of these jobs before? Something to kind of chew on. All right, here's some numbers that I think you'd be interested in. The average age of a gamer is 36, and that number is just going to keep climbing. Just because, like I said, the my generation, likes video games and has played video games. And so, but the generation above mine, which is my parents, um, didn't really grow up with video games and don't necessarily or haven't necessarily played them. So, so obviously, I think that number is going to continue to grow. Look at this number, though, 3.3 to 3.5 billion gamers worldwide, which represents basically almost half the global population. So think about that. One out of every two people on this planet, or nearly one out of every two, I should say, play video games in some shape or form. That is remarkable, right? And 2 billion players engage on mobile devices. So while there are some that are still console based, which is, where you're sitting there on the couch with your Xbox or your PlayStation, there is a significant amount of people now, because of the convenience of the iPhone or iPhone device, I should say, that, people are playing their games on their phones, right? And here in the US, 205 million Americans play video games, which is 61% of the population, which is very, very impressive considering that almost 2/3 of the population, it's basically almost 2/3 playing video games. And look at that, 54% male, 46% female. So men still are playing more games than women, but I've actually seen that number kind of get closer. And we'll talk more about kind of the sort of the pitfalls if you are a woman who likes video games, how it's kind of a male dominated universe in terms of not just the games themselves, but some of the fallout with it. But we'll say that for part two. 83% of game purchases are in the digital format, and the prediction is that 100% by 2028. I find this number interesting because, I guess at one point, prior to the digital universe, we were playing simpler games, but certainly, I don't find that surprising. 100% by 2028. Mobile gaming revenue, 55% of total. I'm sorry. Let me break this down. I can speak today, I promise. So the fact is that people are playing games on the phones, right? And 55% are, in fact, it's a majority now. 55% of total gaming revenue is actually being generated by people playing games on phones. Of the 103 billion on a yearly basis that's generated, 55% of that is going to stuff that you play on your phone. Mobile dominance reflects its low entry barriers. Basically, it's easy. You just download an app. A lot of times that video game app is free. You can start right away. And, whereas think about it, 30 years ago, you had to go to a video game store or order something, in the mail. Go to a department store to get that actual game in the box. I mean, you had to actually work for it. Now it's, if you want to play a game, it's very, very easy to at least download the free version of it. And then of course there's then you can decide whether, if there's an opportunity to level up on these things or get more involved in that particular game. It usually is something that has some kind of price point to it. Anyway, how much time do we spend basically on video games on a weekly basis? Well, I found this interesting. So this is daily, actually. And you can see that the group that plays the most games daily is the 13 to 17-year-olds who play almost 2 hours per day. The 18 to 34 is around 1 to 1.25 to even like it, and these are just averages, right? So in general, just to compare this, if you were talking about streaming like media, for example, streaming media is around, so if video games are for that 18 to 34 group, let's isolate that in particular, they're playing about 10 hours a week, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 hours a week of video gaming, which I think is, to me, sounded kind of low. But if you compare it to other forms, like, for example, streaming media, so I should say like Netflix, et cetera, that's around 14 to 16 hours. So it's interesting that we're still spending a little bit more time, I think, like watching content as opposed to playing with content. But you can definitely see that if ask the question, who plays the most games? It's going to be that group between 13 and 34 years old. And of course, it tails off, as people get older. All right. Best-selling video games in the U.S. 2025. There's your, up to the minute results. Battlefield 6 is at the top, $450 million. We had NBA 2K26, Monster Hunter, Borderlands 4, EA Sports, college football, and globally, the hottest selling video game last year was Honor of Kings, which generated $2.2 billion. So not bad if you can, create that. All right, top selling video games all time. Well, Grand Theft Auto 5. This is kind of I would say the GOAT, maybe. Anyway, 1 billion. It generated $1 billion in its first 24 hours of release. $1 billion. That's pretty amazing. Minecraft sold 350 million units, and then of course we have Call of Duty, which is another very popular series that generated over $10 billion in lifetime sales. So just some random numbers there about top selling video games. You can't talk video games though without talking esports, because that is I wouldn't call it the latest and greatest, but certainly it is one of the more recent, I think, things that's come along on this planet that weren't a part of anything when I was first getting into video games, back in the 70s and the 80s. And let me just tell you a quick story that you won't see on the PowerPoint, but basically, when I was working, I'm still working at ABC7, but back when I was working at ABC7 about 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago or so, my boss called me and said that there was a video game tournament that was being played at a nice historical theater in downtown LA called the Mayan Theater. I think they've knocked it down since, but at one point it was still there. In any event, so they sent me down there to cover it, and it was it was all connected to the FIFA soccer game. And basically what they did was they had throughout the year had thousands of players play online against each other, and they had literally whittled the field down to like 32, and they flew those 32 guys into Los Angeles, wined and dined them for the 2 or 3 days that they were there. And it was mimicking the World Cup. I think it was around 2016. And in any event, basically, they got down to the Final Four, and those four played on stage, or I should say, they played the Final Four and then ultimately the championship on stage in front of this Mayan Theater, in front of a live crowd, which was about 2,000, in front of a worldwide press, and it was a spectacle. And I had no idea that this was even a thing until I actually saw it up close. And since that point, esports have grown exponentially. In fact, you can see the revenue is 4.8 billion in 2025. And of course, online betting is in the esports universe. So, you see ads all the time now for DraftKings or, I know that you can't watch a live sporting event, for example, on television without some kind of advertisement for some kind of betting app. And, I've got Bet MGM on my phone. So when I'm in Nevada or, a couple other states around the country and I happen to be there, I can actually play. I can't do that here. I'd have to do something else like DraftKings or something. But in any event, I digress. But the number of esports users is expected to reach 900 million by 2029. And 319 million watch esports globally. And there's a huge audience in the Asia Pacific region. Pacific spelled wrong there. My apologies. But in any event, and 600 colleges. It's even such a big deal now that actually 600 colleges have varsity teams. It's almost like it's, comparable to, I wouldn't say comparable to, but it's the same feel as, college basketball, college football, golf, swimming, whatever. You get scholarships to participate in these things. And the same can be true for esports. In fact, UC Irvine has a big program right down the road, and they actually have an arena where they play. And so this is an interesting universe that I wasn't aware of. Okay, how about the top esports prize pools? This is in 2024. I know it's a little dated, but I figured it's a good glimpse. But you can see the Esports World Cup 2024 multi-game $70 million, 22 championships. There's a thing called Honor of Kings, $9.6 million top prize, $3 million in Saudi Arabia. So I know the Saudis like to get involved in these types of things, along with obviously regular sports. And you can see Player Unknown Battleground Mobile World Cup 2024. That was held in Riyadh. $3.5 million in prize money, and on down the line. Now, I just wanted to show you before we wrap up this lecture and I give you your code word. Top traditional sports prize pools in 2024. And you can see that it's still not comparable to traditional sports. For example, the NFL, 18 billion basically. Media rights drive 65% of the revenue. Major League Baseball has generated 11.5 billion. Local media plus attendances, NBA. I'll take a tournament, for example, a golf tournament. The Players Championship on the PGA Tour in March offers a singular prize pool of around $20 million. And of course, the top earner last year on the PGA Tour was Scotty Scheffler. I think Scotty pulled in something like 70 million with the bonuses or whatever. So esports isn't quite gotten to that level of traditional sports, but it's certainly talked about. All right, so I want to give you a code word for your quiz, and I'm going to write it down so I don't forget. But your code word for part 1 is going to be esports. Esports is going to be your code word. All right, so make sure that you review the PowerPoint, at least the first 14 slides rather, and I will pick it up with part 2 on slide number 15 where we start getting into history, addiction, etc. All right, see you in part 2.